Hello, and welcome back to the Imperfection Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Possley, the founder of Imperfection Wellness and the creator of Possley's Paradigm. 10 universal truths that I put together into 9 pillars called Possley's Paradigm, and I highly encourage you to go to imperfectionwellness.com. Again, that's imperfectionwellness.com, and download your free copy. Because today we're talking about action, or the next right action, and this is actually part 2. So if you're just tuning in for this episode, I would highly suggest you listen to the episode before this, which is our part 1, because today we're going to continue talking about that next right action. And the quick recap of that, for the longest time when I was stuck associated with my thoughts, these false self-beliefs, these ideas, these stories, which stemmed from my ego. And again, the ego, that part of us that identifies us as who we are. It gives us our identity. But along with ego, which we all have, is that awareness that our ego is constantly judging, rating, and comparing ourselves to others. And when we buy into that and when we believe that, we inadvertently sell ourselves short. Many of us undercompensate, feeling like we're less than. But of course, there are people who overcompensate and they think they're better than. They think they're better than us. They think they're better than you. They think they're better than someone. Or they create an us versus them. And that's what we want to bring our awareness to. Because once we buy into this, if we keep ourselves small, feeling small, we can be lost and overwhelmed. And that happened to me for so many years that I believed what my thoughts said about me and the world around me. But in fact, they were stories, fragments, and half-truths based in ego with never-ending thoughts. And so what we want to do is wake up from this sleepwalking, as I call it. This sleepwalking through life that we're just kind of taking things as they come, which is fine in some aspects, but we're also waiting for something to happen to give us our happiness, to give us our contentment. And I always say, our goal is to find contentment, because when we have contentment, we know we will have good times and bad times, but that inner contentment is the foundation that we build off of. And so today in part 2 of Next Right Action, what I want to talk about are some concepts. And again, in summary, when we set an intention, that intention for me was to re-engage with life. Seeing my thoughts as they sat on the right, and I turned towards the left. I turned away from them. Mentally, I turned away. Sometimes I physically turned my head to the left, because that was my way of saying, I know that I'm separate from you. I have these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and these stories are these never-ending stories will always be there, but I'm going to turn to the left and set an intention to re-engage with life and then perform next right action, no matter how small it is. And that's what we talked about in episode 1. And so another concept I want to talk about this week is one of my favorites. I heard this years ago and started practicing it, and it really is a game changer. And the reason these are game changers is because they pull us back into rational thought, into our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain that gives us rational thinking. And when we do these activities, we're usually doing an action while doing some other thinking. And that first one is what I like to call mindfulness, life at half speed. And I love mindfulness, life at half speed, because you can do it with so many different things. And it can be something as simple as texting someone at half speed, sending an email at half speed, getting dressed at half speed, your walking pace, being intentional with your walking pace and do it at half speed. The easiest thing, washing your hands at half speed. Why? Because we do it multiple times a day. Pay attention to what it feels like to go over and turn the faucet on. And while you're doing that, have some gratitude that you have indoor plumbing and water and soap. Tie a little gratitude in with this. But as you're washing your hands, feel the water as it flows over your hands. And then you add soap. What does that feel like? What's that sensation? And this may sound silly to some of you if you've never done this before, but this really is a game changer because now you're bringing intention into an action. You're not sleepwalking. You're not doing it mindlessly. You're aware of what you're doing. And it's in that awareness that we pull ourselves out of association with our thoughts. And so mindfulness life at half speed is a wonderful trick. But we're still not done washing our hands. Now we got to wash the soap off. Now we got to turn the faucet off. Now we got to dry our hands. And something that we do so routinely that we don't even think about, by bringing mindfulness to it, we force ourselves in a very good way. Maybe I shouldn't say force. We pull ourselves beautifully back into present moment instead of worrying about what might happen tomorrow or having a regret of something that happened yesterday. Those are the ruminating thoughts that pull us to the past and have us worried or overwhelmed of the future, and we're missing out on present moment. And that's why we do mindfulness life at half speed. If you tie your shoes still, and I say that because a lot of people have slip-ons, take the time and pay attention to what it's like to tie your shoes, or to button a shirt, or to get dressed, or to comb your hair, or to take a shower. Do it at half speed. By doing that, you bring awareness to life. Even something like scrolling on social media, which can be a numbing behavior for many because we're doing it mindlessly. I've done it myself. I sometimes still have to catch myself. I still set parameters. I still look at social media. I do it with guardrails. Bring intention into that. What I started realizing is I like a short video clip, and about halfway through I scroll to the next one because my mind is already racing, and I'm like, stop. Either you're getting off social media or bring intentionality into what you're doing. And it's not really life at half speed, but I suddenly realize I'm going to watch this entire video clip. Now, my social media feed is very positive. It is laughter, it is joy, it is positive stories, it's uplifting. I stay away from negativity because our ego feeds off hysteria and negativity. And that's how you can get drawn into something for 4 hours and not even realize it. Yet I bet if you tried to read a book right now, well, especially if you're driving, that's not a good idea. But if you try to read a book after 4 hours of scrolling, it's going to be very hard. And I heard a psychiatrist or psychologist or neurologist, I apologize, I don't know who it was, but it was a learned woman. And she said, it is so hard to go back to doing something like reading a book when life happens so quickly at high speed on social media. And we're training our brains to a point of expecting this fast-paced speed that when we go to read a book, it feels like a snail's pace and it's hard to do. And once I heard that, even though reading a book might not be life at half speed, it is in the sense that I'm not racing my mind by doing something like scrolling or binge watching hours of TV. I'm sitting with intention and reading a book, bringing me back to present moment. And I will say it is hard to focus on reading a book now after being inundated with computers and smartphones and devices 24/7. So that's the awareness we bring to this. We bring awareness to our behaviors, whatever those behaviors are. Can you cook a meal relaxed and at half speed? And maybe it's not at half speed, but maybe you're going to say, I'm bringing intention into cooking and I'm going to enjoy the process. I'm going to enjoy baking. I'm going to enjoy whatever your activity is. I'm going for a walk in the park. I'm going to make this a mindful walk in the park. What do the leaves feel like or sound like underneath my feet as I'm walking? What noises do I hear? Bring your senses into it. What do I see, smell, taste? What can I touch? You bringing awareness and intentionality into actions. And that's the key. That's how we wake up from sleepwalking. And in last week's episode, I alluded to what I call my life preserver list. And I created my life preserver list of activities Because in moments of stress and overwhelm, in the beginning, I couldn't think of an activity to pull me out of that. But when I had my life preserver list, which I made when I was, doing well, or I was in a calm state, in a non-stressed state, I would be able to look at my list in those stressful moments and be like, I can do this. That'll calm me down. And in our stressful states, we're not always in our rational thinking. And the extreme of this is something called amygdala hijack. And I'd heard of amygdala hijack several years ago. In my simple layperson's terms, amygdala hijack is when your brain goes into overdrive from a stress response or a perceived stress that causes a stress response. And when you're in amygdala hijack, you bypass your prefrontal cortex. That's the rational part of our brains. That's the intentionality and rational thought. And when that's bypassed, when that's overridden, we're not able to think clearly. And so many times in my life, I'd be taken down by amygdala hijack because I wanted to present either myself or my concept or my project in such a perfect way, and that it felt like the world was coming down on me. For me, I didn't really associate it as anxiety, but definitely there were moments in my life where I had a stress response well out of proportion to what happened, and I didn't know what to do. And amygdala hijack, just by me being aware of it and shedding light on it, I knew when I started ramping up and my stress started, I could start feeling my stress. I'm like, oh, you're having a response. What can you do? Now, if it's medically safe for you, and it was medically safe for me, and I did this all the time, I learned to take an ice cold shower. Oh, that is so not fun. We can do stuff that's not always fun. We can have preferences, but I'm like, well, is it going to help me? And there was one time I came home from work and I was definitely in a hijack mode, and my old go-to numbing agent of choice was 3 or 4 finger pour of alcohol over some ice and a couple of those to numb. And that would usually get me feeling better. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something different. I want to do something healthier. And so I went in, turned the water on as cold as it could get, and I stood under there, and boy, it was tough. And I gotta say, it shook me out of amygdala hijack and brought me back to present moment. Many of you may say, you know what, it's not medically safe for me, I'm not gonna do this. And again, consult your physician, consult your medical provider, because it can cause a stress response of its own. So I just wanna give that clear caveat. But something else you can do is just dip your face in ice cold water. Either fill your sink or a container of water and do a quick dip. There's the research talks about the mammalian dive reflex, and immersing your face, specifically the area of your trigeminal nerve on your face, in cold water causes this. It causes your heart to slow. It causes your body to make changes, and it pulls you out of this heightened alarm state. It is jarring and it is a shock, and that's why literally I say to people, do not do any of this without consulting a medical professional. I want to be very clear with that. Again, I knew my health and I knew it was okay and safe for me to do. But let's say you're like, you know what? Forget if it's medically safe for me. I'm not doing that. I get it. What can you do? Bring awareness to your breathing. Count to 4 on the inhale. Hold it for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 4, and then hold that for a count of 4. It's called box breathing or square breathing. And if you don't want to do that, do 25 jumping jacks. And when you're doing an activity such as the box breathing or jumping jacks or whatever it is, you're performing an action while counting. That pulls you back into present moment because your brain is no longer on ruminating thoughts. It's an intentional thought. And counting to 25 as you do 25 jumping jacks, you're also getting rid of the stress. You're releasing stress. And I believe I've talked about it on this podcast before. I was reading, I believe it was Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth or The Power of Now, one of those 2 books. He talks of how if you see geese or swans ever fighting, after the fight, they swim off and then they kind of like shake their feathers and kind of like jump out of the water a little and shake it all off. That's them releasing stress. They don't store the stress. Humans store our stress. And so when you're in an amygdala hijack, when you're in a stress overwhelm, when you're struggling, that is when you need to release that energy. And that's why I love jumping jacks. Again, if you have physical limitations, you might not be able to do that. Maybe you have to go for a walk. Maybe you can go for a run. Maybe you can't do those. What about some gentle stretching? What about some yoga? Tapping. I believe it's the tappingsolution.com. I have a dear friend of mine. She's the one who turned me on to tapping. And it helps release energy. Whatever it is, just be aware that in that stressful situation, as uncomfortable as it is to feel, you want to let that out. Let that energy out. Don't store it. But what we've inadvertently been taught to do is to push it down, to consciously suppress it, to unconsciously repress it, and then it sneaks out in other ways. And instead of pouring a 3-4 finger drink of alcohol, I now have healthier actions. And stress is still coming out that's been stored over the years, but at least I'm not putting new stress in. And that's why, for me, I love meditation. And there are so many different types of meditation. You have meditation where you sit in a certain posture and you think of nothing. You have others where you focus on something like a candle or your breath. You have others where you get a mantra. I teach Vedic meditation, which is a mantra-based meditation. You can also do guided imagery or guided meditations, whether it's a body scan, whether it's just general guided imagery, whether it's a guided breath meditation, guided meditation. There are so many apps out there. I'm on Insight Timer as a teacher, but I've been using it for many years. Many, many, many wonderful free meditations out there. There's different apps as well. You can go on and do an internet search for free guided meditations. I mean, you name it, they're going to have something for everyone. So whether you have a voice preference, you're going to be able to find a meditation out there that works for you. Some are going to be 5 minutes, some might be 20 minutes, everything in between and even longer. Whatever works for you. It's not one size fits all. But the goal is that we find something that works for us, because what works for me may or may not work for you, or it may work for you differently. And so that's why we think of the different types of meditation as well as different activities. Going back to next right action, during my meditation teacher training, my teacher Jeff always said, we can't hate our way to love. And while that's true, I didn't like that expression, because what he said next was what was tough, is that when we are aware, we are the ones who need to bring love to the table. Again, we can't hate our way to love. And so what that said to me was that, wow, in a situation where I want to demonize somebody, I actually have to have empathy for them. And I have to recognize their fallibility, their humanness. And that's hard. That's very hard, especially because I wanted to make so many people enemies. In other podcast episodes, I talked about how I inadvertently chose to play a victim martyr at times. And you do that by making someone else the enemy. So when you come to the table and you send love, that can be tough. And how do we do that? Well, start by sending love to yourself. I still fall. I still make mistakes. I still say the wrong things. But instead of that paralyzing me and preventing me from moving forward, I try my best. I will make errors. Why? Because I'm on this earth as a human. We're fallible. We're going to make mistakes. Don't put anyone on a pedestal only to tear them down when they make a mistake. Let's level the playing field. Instead of false hero worship, let's just recognize we're all on this journey and we're all making mistakes. And when we check our ego at the door and realize, wow, that ego is going to take us on a wild roller coaster ride of highs and lows, let's come back to present moment. That's why we're talking about this. And so we start by sending love to self. And then we send love to the other person. And we might need to do that from a great distance. I think that's an advanced technique, in my opinion. That's a tough one at times. But we can't hate our way to love. And if I can't send love, then I send some positive energy and I walk away. Or I think of one aspect of them, whether it's they have nice sunglasses or they drive a nice car, and maybe that's even too much. But whatever it is, we're pushing out that energy because the negative energy only hurts us. That's the why behind sending love. I can be cynical and angry and hate, but what's that going to get me? Another aspect to next right action when you're in those moments of overwhelm is affirmations and gratitude. And I love affirmations and gratitude because those are my mindset shifters. I can be having a horrible day and do an affirmation or practice some gratitude, and it does not negate my bad day. It is not toxic positivity. It's not toxic happiness. It's, you know what, I'm having a bad day and I'm going to be okay. My go-to affirmation is the paradigm affirmation. I am beautiful, I am strong, I am worth it, I'm enough. And while I might not always feel that on the inside, I know when I free myself from ego, my true self, my true inner self in present moment that's free of ego believes that I am beautiful, I am strong, I am worth it, I'm enough. But you might want a different affirmation. Write it on a note card and tape it to your mirror, tape it to your refrigerator, tape it to your laptop or your desktop at work. Same with gratitude. What's one thing you can be grateful for today? Maybe it's that you have the ability to listen to this podcast. Simple as that. You can be grateful for that. You can be grateful for choice. We have so many choices in our lives. What if we're just grateful for our choices? And if you're not sure what to be grateful for, you can also be grateful for any of your senses. There are people who can't see to read a book. There are people who can't hear to hear a favorite song. So be grateful for that. Pull in your senses. And then tie that in with self-compassion. I was talking to a friend one day who's like, I have so much and I don't always feel it. I feel bad. What kind of a horrible person am I? I said, you're not a horrible person. I was in that same situation where I knew I had so much, and it wasn't that I was ungrateful, but I just didn't feel it. I was numb on the inside. And this was several years ago, before the paradigm, before imperfection wellness. And I used the paradigm almost daily. I mean, definitely I use it daily because it's a roadmap in a world that doesn't have a clear roadmap for getting us unstuck. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to be able to share it here, imperfections and all, which is why I called it imperfection wellness, wellness for the perfectly imperfect, which is all of us. And in talking to this same friend, she shared with me that she likes to journal. And on my website, imperfectionwellness.com, you can click on free resources and get a free prompt journal and a free gratitude journal. And if journaling is your thing, then there's a free resource. Whatever works for you. We're trying to soften the hit of life, whatever that hit is, to dull the blade of the sword. Because we're still going to get hurt. We're still going to have bad days. We're still going to be sad. We're still going to grieve. But we can have contentment from within. And our feelings and emotions are not mutually exclusive. And that's why I said we can have that bad day and still have gratitude. But it's not toxic positivity. It's not saying, oh, I had a bad day, but I'm happy. You don't have to be happy that you had a bad day. You don't have to be happy in a moment. You can feel your emotions. I'd rather people feel their emotions than push them away or suppress them or numb them through behaviors, whether it's, again, overeating, over-drinking, over-shopping, over-exercising, whatever's overindulging, over-scrolling, over-binge-watching. And there's zero judgment in that because I've done all those behaviors because I didn't know what my alternatives were. That's our life preserver list. That's why we have it. And this is the culmination of several years of work. And in the first episode, not the first episode, in part 1 of Next Right Action, I talk about that I've been working on this paradigm for years, and so happy to have the closing concept, which was action. And I changed that from action to intention with Next Right Action, however small that action is. One thing that I've come to appreciate in life is my checklists. I create a lot of checklists because, one, it gets thoughts out of my mind. So if I have an idea, I write it down, either electronically or on paper, but I do a lot of pencil and paper. That's my preferred method, old school, because I get to see it, touch it, erase it, change it, but literally an old mechanical pencil and scraps of paper, organized. I shouldn't say scrapped, but pieces of paper. And in that checkbox world, I will take a task and break it down into manageable parts, because it's still easy for me to feel overwhelmed when too much comes at me at once. But when I break it down into small manageable steps, I get to check that box. And that's a sense of accomplishment by getting something completed. And I was talking to another friend who does checklists, and he says, I have 3 or 4 things on my checklist that I just keep them there and I don't know why. They don't mean anything to me. They kind of are heavy energy. They're too much. It's stuff I don't really care about anymore. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, what would letting go do? And he said, what do you mean? I said, what if you let go? What if you took them off your list? Do they matter? Are they important? Because if you've had something on your checklist for more than several months, maybe it should be called a parking lot that you look at when you want something to do. And I do have a parking lot list, but it's very different than my daily checklist. And we talked a couple months later, and he just had this smile on his face. He's like, I looked at my checklist and 4 things were on there that meant nothing to me, that were the shoulds. I felt like I should do them. And in another episode, I talked about don't should all over yourself. Cute little play on words. He felt that he had to do this. It was on his should list. And so he got rid of them. And he's down to 2 things. And those 2 things are important to him, but they're not time sensitive. So it's almost a parking lot list for him. But my parking lot list is what I look to when I have time and I want to see if there's something I want to start on. Whether it's a book I want to write, a podcast episode I want to do, a newsletter idea I have, whatever it may be. I have a huge parking lot list, but none of it is time sensitive because I let those ideas go, but I do write them down so they're out of my brain. And then my daily list, this podcast, for instance, I wanted it to be in 1 part. I realized the content was too much. I broke it up into 2 parts. And part 2 is delayed. I'm recording it now, a week after I wanted to record it. And it sat there weighing on me. And I woke up and I said, you're doing it today. It's going to be imperfect. And that's okay. Because my ego wants to compare me to all the other great podcasts out there. And whether they're produced or not, how much better they are than mine. That's the ego. And when I observe the ego and set my intention to record the podcast and turn my head to the left and perform the next right action, I record it. And I get to check that box off my list today. And I'm very happy for that. This is what Possley's paradigm is about. Applying these 9 pillars, these 10 universal truths. Again, affirmations and gratitude is combined. So not to confuse anybody, but I put them into 9 pillars because it's a roadmap that you follow in any order you want. I have a book coming out in, I believe, winter 2025, and I'm very excited because it takes all these concepts and really goes into great detail about each of them and how to apply them to your daily life. That's another checkbox moment. And I'm passionate about this because I didn't feel like I had a roadmap. And I'm still unweaving patterned behaviors. There's a term I coined called Patterned Behavior Highway. Where do my patterned behaviors take me? And because they're so patterned, I don't even question them. But now that I'm aware, I start questioning them like, that's why. There's this patterned behavior highway. But now that I question it, I'm able to change my action around it. So this is growing and evolving. It's fluid. So with that, when you get your copy of the paradigm, follow it in any order. There's no order you need to follow it in. It's your tool that you use for you. And I'm so glad to have this venue, my gratitude to have this venue to put forth this information and close out my first season, season 1 of the Imperfection Wellness podcast. I've been dreaming of this for a couple years, and to have finally put it in motion is amazing. And I sincerely thank you for being on this journey with me. We're going to stumble and fall together, but we're going to get back up because we're resilient. That's what we do. And we're not going to let perfection prevent us from doing something. I could easily scrap this entire episode and re-record it, but I'm not going to do that. Whatever I think those flaws are, that's my ego overthinking. Because most of you are going to think, wow, this wasn't that bad. Don't know what he's talking about. But it's that inner dialogue, that inner voice. Whatever your inner dialogue and your inner voice is saying, know that you're separate from it. And I hope the paradigm and these concepts can support you on your wellness journey. So with that, thank you for listening. Wishing you all the best on your wellness journey. For more information, always visit imperfectionwellness.com. And until next time, when we open with season 2, and I'm looking forward to that. Thanks so much.